Today I'm going to talk to you about how to get started with knitting cables. And cables are probably one of the most favorite things that I have, that I like about knitting, because I like these embellishments where you take stitches and you can create all these kind of swirly effects. This is the back of a sweater I knitted a couple of months ago, actually this time last year, and you can see how these stitches appear to be moving around and as though I've created cords and knitted them and then sewn them on. But this is actually created as you knit, just by changing the order of stitches. Now, looking at cable patterns, they can be a little bit intimidating because you get all this myriad of weird symbols. And this is a really complex cable pattern, but for all intents and purposes, all these different symbols, they can be notated in different ways, but they all mean similar things. They're basically changing the order of stitches. So here's another example of a four different simple types of notation, and these four different boxes here are showing the exact same type of instruction. It's saying you need to do one thing, and it's doing things basically the same way. This particular symbol means cable 2 to the back, or cross 2 to the back using purl stitches. But we'll demonstrate that as we go along. So what I'm going to show you are a couple of different methods of cables which twist stitches, and it creates a twisted effect. Okay, so here I have cross 2 to the right, or cross 2 to the back, and here's an example of notation. It's worked over 4 stitches, and this is the actual row where you're actually going to be changing the order of stitches. Here's an example of cross 2 to the left, or cross 2 to the front. Again, worked over 4 stitches, and this is the row where you're actually changing the order of stitches. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this one here, cross 2 to the front. So I have some work that I started here, and a good thing to remember and to notice about cable work is that you usually have the stitches that are kind of the stars of the show, which in this case are going to be the 4 stitches in the middle here, and you have background stitches, which are often, in general, worked in a purl background. Not always, but they are often worked with a purl background here. So I've knitted up a good, inch or so here, and I'm going to start cabling these 4 stitches. I'm going to start crossing and changing the order of them. Okay, so here are some examples of some cable needles. If you inherited your grandmother's knitting set, you probably have cable needles that don't look like this. The older cable needles were just almost look like little short double-pointed needles. The ones you can get today have this little kink in the middle so that you don't drop your stitches. This is quite a long one here for numerous stitches where you're working cables over lots and lots of stitches. Here's one for a smaller gauged project, and here's the one that I'm going to use today. All right. Now that kink is for holding stitches so they don't fall off. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay. So as I knit through this, you need to start paying attention to when you're going to need your cable needle, and I'm going to need them when I hit this stitch right here. So, knitting through, I've got a couple of border stitches, 4 background stitches here, and now I'm going to start cables. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do cross 2 to the front. All right. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the first 2 stitches and I'm going to cross them over the next 2 stitches. And that's what this symbol is showing here. You're taking 2 stitches and they're going to go over top of the last 2 stitches. So to do that, I'm going to take my cable needle, move this out of the way, my cable needle here, and I'm going to slip the first 2 stitches onto it and hold them and save them for later. And because I'm crossing to the front, I'm going to save them towards the front. So to do that, I'm going to take this cable needle and slip it purlwise into the first 2 stitches, like this. Okay, and I'm going to see, this is where this kink comes in useful. It's going to hold on to those stitches so they don't fall off. And I'm going to put it to the front and just leave it there. Now the weirdest thing about starting off with cables is that when you work with a cable needle like this, it's going to flop around But it's best just to kind of, it's something you just have to get used to. It's going to flop around and you just have to sort of live with it. Okay, so I've crossed these two to the front. Now I'm going to knit the next two stitches, alright? So I'm going to knit them just as I normally would. Oops, there we go. Alright, and then I've knit those two stitches. Now I'm going to drop my left hand needle and pick up my cable needle, which is sitting here at the front, and then use it as though it's just my normal needle, and knit these two stitches back on. Like so. Oops. There we go. Alright. Then I'm going to put my cable needle down and I'm going to carry on knitting the rest of my row. Now it's hard to see the cross in this, but you're going to see it as you continue working through your pattern. Now the thing about cables, a couple things to remember about cables is that first of all, they're not knit in consecutive rows usually, because you need some breathing room in between each time you try and cross these stitches. You can see this is really tight now. So usually there's between, I don't know, usually about 3 or 4 rows that you knit even so that you have room to do some more crossing again. Now the question you usually get is, now that I've knitted those, what do I do on the wrong side? And what you do on the wrong side is you knit the stitches as they appear. And you hear that and you go, well, what does that mean? Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to knit these 2 border stitches, which I'm doing in a garter stitch. So get those out of the way. Okay. And now I'm going to knit these as they appear. So these are my background stitches, which were purls on the other side. Now they're knit on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and knit them as they appear. They look like knit stitches. Well, I'm going to knit them. Now I'm getting to the 4 stitches in the middle, which I cabled, which I crossed, and they're all appearing as purl stitches. So I'll just go ahead and purl them. Now here's something you need to remember, another thing to remember about cabling is that because you're starting to twist stitches, you're going to lose some tension. You can see it looks like there's some kind of gaps there, and it's just because I'm knitting in kind of an awkward position right now. But it's important that when you're switching between your background stitches and the stitches that you're cabling, it's important to snug them up, tighten them up a bit, because you'll end up with holes in between the stitches that you're cabling and the stitches that are meant to be your background. So it's a difficult thing, but it takes practice, and what you want to do is the overall effect is a nice even tension throughout. Okay, so now I've knitted the wrong side row. So I'm going to knit the next couple of rows even, and then I'm going to show you the opposite cable to the back. Okay, so now I've knitted a few rows even, and now you can more clearly see what happened when we cabled those stitches. And you can also see a little bit where I'm talking about keeping your tension even. You can see that these stitches look a little loose, so I didn't do a really good job of keeping my tension even there. Never mind, we're going to keep going now and do the opposite. We're going to do cross 2 to the back, which in this particular type of notation looks like this. You're going to work over 4 stitches, take the first 2 stitches and cross them beneath the next 2 stitches. Okay, so knitting down to these rows, I'm going to try and keep my tension a bit more even this time. Okay, doing my background stitches. Alright, now I've come to the point where I want to start changing the order of my stitches again. So this time, that was a bit dramatic. This time, you're going to take these 2 stitches, or take your cable needle and slip the first 2 stitches purlwise, just the same as you did before, but this time you're going to put them towards the back. Now to do that, you just have to kind of hang it out towards the back, and that's what it looks like, right? Then you're going to knit the next 2 stitches, keeping your tension even. Drop the left needle and knit the 2 stitches off of your cable needle. Now this is one of the things that is awkward about cabling, especially when you're just getting started, is that sometimes if your tension's a little loose, you're going to lose your stitches off this needle. So that's why this sort of thing takes some practice, but it's like anything. It feels awkward when you're first doing it, and then once you get going on it, it gets easier and easier. Okay, so now I've changed those order. Now that those stitches are sitting behind, the first 2 stitches are sitting behind the second 2 stitches. Then I'm going to go ahead and knit the rest of my background stitches. And my border stitches. Okay. So now I've got kind of an interesting thing happening here. I had my first cable was where the stitches were crossed to the front. My second cable are where the stitches are crossed to the back. Now I'm going to knit another couple of rows even so you can see a little bit more what the final effect is. Okay, so now you can see I've knit a few rows even, and you can see the difference between the two. The first one was crossed 2 to the front, and you can see the stitches are crossing over the front of the next 2 stitches and creating this kind of right hand twist. Here's cross 2 to the back, and the first 2 stitches are beneath the second 2 stitches, and now we have a different turn. We have a anti-clockwise turn to our stitches. Now I'm going to show you this one here, and this one is cross 2 to the back, where you purl those stitches that you put to the back. All right, and it's often used, instead of using 4 knit stitches in a row, I'm going to do it over 2 purl stitches and 2 knit stitches. All right, so what I've done is I've knit to that point where I'm going to start cabling. Take my cable needle, I'm going to take these 2 purl stitches and I'm going to slip them onto my cable needle, and I'm going to put them in the back. Okay, pop it to the back and let them hang out there. Then I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches like this, 1 and 2, and then I'm going to take those 2 purl stitches hanging out at the back there and work them as purl stitches. Right? Changing the order of the stitches, that's all I'm doing. This is how you start to get your traveling cables, where they start moving around on your work. There we go. And then just for the rest of this, I'm just going to go ahead and work the rest of the work as normal. Okay, so now what I've done is I've changed the order of stitches so that these knit stitches are starting to move outwards into my border stitches. Now I'll work a couple more rows so you can see what that effect looks like. So now I've worked a couple of more rows, and now you can kind of see what's happening now that I've moved on a little bit. Here's the point where I cross the stitches again. I cross them towards the back, and I put the 2 purls that were previously on this side in the middle, and now you can see I've created a separation between my knit stitches, so it appears that these stitches are starting to travel outwards here. So those are a couple of examples of cable stitches and a couple of different types of notation for them. One more tip that I'll have for you as you get more experienced with cabling is that you're going to see legends like this in your patterns. And a really useful thing is to color code them so that as you're working through them, as you're working and looking and trying to figure out what they all mean, you can understand what they are at a single glance. So you can color code them and then go into your pattern and actually match them up. And it'll help you to understand as well what's actually happening in the pattern, what it should look like at the end. So that's all there is for cables today. Please feel free to contact me if you have got any questions. You can reach me at my blog, which is listed down below. And until then, happy knitting!